All right, we're going to go ahead and call this meeting to order. And to Commissioners Mary Lawson Brown, Rufus Borum, Justin Campbell, James Norwood Jr., you're hereby notified that a special call meeting of the Palaca City Commission is called to be held at the regular meeting place of the City Commission at City Hall, 201 North 2nd Street in the city of Palaca to begin at 1 p.m. Tuesday, May 26, 2015. The purpose of the meeting is to interview the finalist candidates for the position of City Manager. And we will have our invocation by Commissioner Borum, and you can also lead us in the pledge to the flag.
Bow our heads, please. Dear God, I'd like to thank you for this day. Thank you for your grace and your mercy. Also, thank you for your unconditional love. Dear God, we ask that you give us the knowledge, wisdom, and guidance in helping to select a city manager who's going to be out front and lead us in the direction that we need to go. We ask these things in Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And so that we got everything in place, we've got our matrix, just to kind of go through process. Our matrix gives us scoring by education, by experience, other experience, financial budget, capital improvement plan, human resources, CRA, planning and development and growth, management, union negotiation experience, golf course, airport management experience, and we have 7 standard questions. We have opportunities to ask additional questions and score those as well. Everything is done on a Likert scale of 1 to 5, 5 being the highest. Once we go through the matrix for each individual, we're going to tally scores, but what we're going to do at the end is we're going to make a decision. We're going to deliberate once this is all over, and we're going to make a decision as individuals, not based on these arbitrary numbers that go in place, but we're going to sit down and have dialogue, and we're going to have that dialogue, and we're going to make a determination on who we have. In the past, I think the numbers have caused us to be in a position where we make a decision based on numbers, not based on people. And so we're going to have dialogue, because we're going to work with this individual and select this person, and we're going to have dialogue, and we're going to walk out of here with someone that we choose. And that's where we'll be. 3 votes will be the 3 votes will allow us to get there. If we use the Likert scale, we'll use it just as a process of helping us identify how people score with one another as a reference tool. But we will deliberate and come up with a new city manager. Any questions?
I have a question.
Yes, sir.
Just a point of clarification, at this process, will we allow public comment or not?
No.
Great.
Just a point of information too, if you have any questions when you're filling out your matrix, on your agenda is each person's qualifications. So you can refer to those.
Right. So for public comment, after we make our selection, at the end of our process, just before we adjourn, we have time for public comment. That's after we've gone through our selection process. Prior to that, it's going to be a decision that's going to be made by the commission, not by any outside influence.
Thank you.
Any questions, concerns, comments? Our interview schedule is as follows. 1:15 is Patrick Kennedy, 2:15 is James Drum, 3:15 Lyndon Bonner, 4:15 Don Holmes, 5:15 Terry Suggs. I've also indicated to the candidates, if we finish early, to be on standby just in case they get a phone call for an earlier time.
That's my.
We can go ahead and let are we ready for Mr. Kennedy now?
Yes.
Okay, Mr. Kennedy, we can go ahead and let Mr. Kennedy come in.
Where are we starting at, Mayor? We're starting on this end.
Start here if you want to.
Where are we starting?
We'll start with the questions. We'll start with section 1. We'll
No,
go.
with whom? With whom do we start?
Patrick Kennedy is first.
No, he's talking about him
On the
as
board, how we gonna flow on the board?
We'll flow.
Okay.
We'll start. We'll ask the question if we want to. We can I'll read the questions off that we have on here,
That's good.
and then we'll just have one person ask the questions. If you got any follow-up questions, anything else, just interject as you please.
That's fine.
So
Okay.
you got the question.
I've got the questions.
All right, thanks, sir.
Okay. You want to sit up here?
Makes no difference. I want to see better now, I see it.
Whatever your pleasure is. That was your escape.
We got public comment out here. We got public comment out here.
All right. Can we close the door behind us, please? I'm sorry. Thank you. All right, Mr. Kennedy, we're going to go ahead and get started. Just go ahead and state your name for the record so we have that.
Patrick Kennedy, 124 Central Avenue, Crescent City, Florida.
And we're going to ask you a series. We've got a series of questions for you that we're going to ask you initially, and then at that point, there's going to be an opportunity for the commissioners to ask you questions as well. And if you have any follow-up questions during the time of which I'm asking questions, then feel free to chime in. And the first question we have for you is, where do you see yourself in 5 years?
City of Black. City
And-
manager,
Okay. And what, in 10 years, is the second part of that?
same job, I hope, same career. You know, I think if you're going to apply for a job like this, you have to have a minimum commitment of 5 to 6 years. And you know, 10 years is kind of where you really start to see things that you've been working on really start to come forward. So I picture myself, if I'm up at this position in the city, working in the city of Palatka.
And then as a follow-up to that, if you see yourself with the city of Palatka the next 5 to 10 years, how do you see the city of Palatka changing? Where do you see the city of Palatka in 5 years and 10 years, respectively?
I see the city of Palatka becoming what I think it's been working towards for the last 20, 25 years. There is some sense that there's been an overabundance of focus on the waterfront, but I think that's a good jumping off point for the rest of the city. So I think that's going to create real opportunity. If nothing else, it kind of presents a program for maybe how to do things, how not to do things in other areas of the city. But I think Palaka's got nowhere to go but up, and I think I'd like to be part of it. I think you have the Gem City is its name, but you do have a gem here on St. Johns River, one of the few cities that is right on the river. And you have a history of being an industrious place. So I think being able to attract employers is going to be probably one of the the most important aspects of seeing that vision through is employment is something that Palatka, Putnam County in general needs to work on. And if we can tackle that, even with some small gains, I think that'll start to get the ball rolling for Palatka.
What will be your strategy for attracting employers?
Well, there has to be a cooperative effort with the county. And the chamber has to be involved, but I think part of it would be the city itself deciding what kind of employers it wants to target, and you just have to go after it. That's something we're working on in Crescent City, and we're restarting a little bit our redevelopment of our signature property, and that's one of the things I've told them. I said, we just can't advertise a property for sale and hope the right guy's going to show up. We need to figure out who we want, and we need to go get them. So I think part of that would be what kind of industry, what kind of businesses does the city of Palatka, do you folks and citizens want to see come here? I wouldn't presuppose what that is, but I would certainly do what it takes to go get them.
Have you done your own independent evaluation as to what type of businesses you think would be viable here?
Well, I think the obvious one are tourism-based businesses, visitor-based businesses, because of the asset you have with the St. Johns River. I think this is part of what requires a partnership with the county, is the port on the north end of the city certainly has opportunities there. I think City of Palatka needs to be proactive with the county on the Shands Bridge issue, getting that bridge raised so that we can have better water-based industry coming to that port area and, quite frankly, to downtown Palatka. You've got a little small cruise ship that comes down every once in a while. It might be an opportunity for larger cruise ships to do day trips down the river and not feel like they can't get past Clay County. So that's certainly an opportunity. And then you have your airport and the business park development adjacent to that certainly creates opportunity for, I think, the call centers are too come and go no matter where they are. Certainly if they show up, take them, but we can't pretend that's going to be the long-term solution because you've seen what happens. They stay for 3 to 5 years and then they move on. Doesn't mean we turn them down if the deal makes financial sense for the county and the city, but I don't see that type of business as a long-term solution for Palaca or Putnam County's employment issues. I was a little hopeful that the bus, the rural bus project was going to turn into a little industry that Palaca could take advantage of, and I'm not sure why that died out, but something I might want to look into and see if there's a reason why we couldn't maybe help those folks get back on track and maybe build some transportation business here based off something we know the problems and the needs for, and that's rural public transportation, which as an aside is an issue that is coming to a head here for the whole county. Is our rural public transportation could be disappearing, and that would be a bad thing for everybody involved, including the city of Palaca. So that's something we would need to join forces with the county on and see if we can't make sure that the funding stays in place so that we can maintain that public transportation. It brings folks to the city of Palaca from all parts of the county for medical services and for jobs and things of that nature. So that's one issue that we'll need to look at as a city as well as the county.
What's your experience in dealing with the media, i.e. television, newspaper, radio, the World Wide Web? And do you view the media as a positive force, and if so, how?
Yes. Well, I think you can't avoid the media in this job, and you shouldn't. So I have pretty good experience with them. The problem I have in Crescent City is I sometimes feel like I got to beg them to come down there. Because I do see them as important. They're important for communicating. We have people who don't come to meetings, and then a decision's made, and we move forward with it, and they say, where'd this come from? So the media can help you with the transparency. It can help you with the communication that you need as a local government to let people know what's going on in these city commission meetings and board meetings and workshops that they can't attend. So certainly it's important to that message. The op-ed pieces are important to understanding how some people are viewing our job and our city and how we're doing. So that's certainly a place you look at for some input. So the World Wide Web is the long-term, that's where the media is going to. Still love to see Palaca Daily News, I still love picking up that paper, but a lot of what's done is on the internet. It's crucial to the future. To me, it's at least as crucial, if not more crucial, than 4 Landing 17 at this point.
Explain that.
I don't want to make it sound like it's much.
Explain that.
Well, it's because that's where commerce is now, is on the internet. That's how, if you're going to be a visitor-based economy, that's how you're going to get your word out. Folks are going to want to come, and this is maybe more of this is a Crescent City perspective as well, as we got bigger transportation issues than you. We don't have an east-west in Crescent City. We got to go to Palaca basically to go east and west, or down to Barberville. So we're truly a rural old Florida town, and to let people know we're there, the internet is where it's at. And Palaca, I think, is the same thing. That's something that we need to, as a county, as cities, stay up on the internet infrastructure. It's something Crescent City struggles with. We joined the NFPA, the North Florida Broadband Authority, because we had one choice, Windstream, and it wasn't a very good choice. So we jumped on board with that out of necessity as much as anything else, and it's helped. I actually get decent internet at home now. So we can actually, we have high-speed internet option in Crescent City. It's not where you want it to be, but it's further along than it was, so.
I guess, news media, excluding present news reporters, of course, they don't always shed a good light on the Palatka nor the city manager. I think there are times where they're going to be pressed that may be a little adverse. How do you cope with that? How do you cope with
Well, you gotta understand the old saying, you don't want to get in a fight with somebody who has, ink by the barrel. Especially on the small issues, you read an article and they seem to be getting, and all of a sudden there's a couple of just things they miss, and it changes the tone or the tenor of the decision, but you just gotta, and a lot of times you just gotta work through it. A lot of times, and the other thing you can take away from it is, they were in the room and this is how they interpreted it. So maybe you need to fix how you deliver the message so that it's more clear what you were trying to accomplish and why you're trying to accomplish it, without calling them wrong, calling them attacking, saying, hey, look, I think you missed something here. Let's talk about it, bring it up at the next meeting, or talk to the reporter and say, hey, I think you missed something. And I feel, especially with the Palatka Daily News folks, you can talk to them and try to straighten out misunderstandings that show up in print. But I've had instances where I did a letter to the editor, my words, and they changed the letter. It wasn't my letter anymore, and it changed the answer. I'm like, then you're like, what do you do to that? I don't know. That was not Palatka Daily News, by the way.
Mr. Brown?
But so it's something you got to struggle with, but I don't think you can lose your head over it because they're still important.
Sometimes if we pick up the paper and we find out that they have already come to a conclusion on what the commission is doing, how do you feel about getting information to us before it hits the paper? Because people call us for answers sometimes, or other things happen, and I'd like to know how you deal with getting the communication to us about moving.
It would be key for any city manager to want their commissioners to hear newspaper-worthy news from their city manager before it gets in the paper. That's kind of a no-brainer to me. One of the things I've done in the city of Crescent City that helps with that a little bit is I started our own newsletter, and I put out what's happening in the city. I'm the one who publishes it. I'm the one who puts it together, and I send it out by email and occasionally with our utility bills so that we can get out ahead on the communication of things that are coming our way. And I certainly make sure that all my commissioners are copied, and I try to talk to them by phone, if not in person, on stuff that I think is going to make the paper. Now, I would ask the same of you, because I've had my own experience where I find out about it in the paper, but my commissioners knew about it. So, I prefer that not to happen either. I think so that the open line of communication and trying to make sure, especially our larger issues, are being discussed openly in advance of a newspaper article is important. So you just do your best to make sure that happens. I'm not sure you can get 100% success on that, but it's very important.
Mr. Mayor, one other follow-up
Yes, sir.
question again. A lot of our business owners in town, they, I guess you might say, for lack of a better term, they're saying that we as a city don't communicate well to them different groups. And I guess, what's your take on how you would communicate not only with the commission, but also with different groups around town to make sure that the ongoings that's in the city are accurate and it's actually coming from a reliable source, and that source is the source that basically will make sure that those things that are being communicated happen.
Yes. Well, I think you have to go to them. You can't wait for them to come to you. I think that's the key part of it, is go visit those business owners, be a part of civic and church organizations where you can have those communications. And, part of it's also, I get people who sometimes apologize to me for coming up to me while I'm eating dinner. I know you're not working. I said, no, talk to me. You don't have time to come to my office. Now's when you see me. Let me know what's on your mind. But I appreciate, the comment that sometimes they get it from an unreliable source and fiction becomes fact real quick. And so you have to be able to develop that trust so that they know when you're talking to them, you're being straight with them. You're not hiding the ball or beating around the bush. You're telling them how it is and why it is. And if they don't like it, then please help me understand what you think we could do different. But this, it's communication, and you don't limit your communications to the folks running the shipyards and the GP. You talk to, the mom and pops, the cafe owners, the small store owners, and as far as businesses go, and your residents too. Your residents, you can't overlook them and their perception of what's going on. And that helps me do my job better, and it helps me help you guys do your job better. It's just communication, and direct communication, not saying, well, you didn't show up at the meeting, too bad. You didn't have your input at that public meeting, then you're not interested and I can't talk to you. You can't have that approach. People are busy, and you got to try to reach out to them directly.
Specifically, in what way would you communicate to the business or the community in a consistent way that would not happen?
Well, I think a newsletter is a good idea. I don't know if you have one, but I think having one, I haven't seen it. I think having one is important, at least monthly. If you can afford to do it more, you should. But that puts it in black and white. It's in writing. You kind of let them know up front what's going on. But also, you have to show up. You have to be the guest speaker at the Kiwanis. You have to be a member of Kiwanis or the Rotary. You have to go to the churches. You have to go talk to the people directly, and just maintaining that line of communication, written, oral, your website, and a key part of it also is making sure you're communicating with your staff, because the staff live and work in the area, and people who know the Assistant Public Works Director are going to go to him for their information. So you got to make sure you're having staff meetings and keeping them in the loop and communicating what's going on, even though they may not be directly involved in what's going on the waterfront. If they're in a department head meeting, hearing about what we've done and where we're going, then they can communicate that accurately to people who are talking to them. So it's just constant communication with everybody that you deal with when it comes to the City of Palatka business.
Now I'm going to ask you to talk to us about the most controversial issue that you've encountered as a manager or an administrator. With specificity, tell us how you resolved it and what would you have done differently.
Probably one of the most controversial as a manager was when I was still with the county as the Planning and Development Services Director. The building official at the time was hired right before I was promoted in the position, so I didn't really hire him. And there was pretty early on a conflict, kind of a territorial battle, if you will, and a misunderstanding that they all thought I wanted to be the building official, which was so far from the truth, I can't tell you. But there was a realtor for it, and I had staff working for the building official who were going to contractors and spreading rumors and lies about what I'm trying to take over and Mr. Regulation and all this, basically spreading bad vibes, if not specifically bad statements about me and what my goals were for the department, to the point where I had to go in and have a chat with Mr. Leary because they were going to him. And what I did was I sat down with those contractors and I said, look, you don't really know what's going on behind closed doors as far as the operations. If you're not getting your permits, if you're not getting the customer service you deserve, tell me. But I've got some real personnel issues here I'm trying to manage, and that's what my job is, and you just got to let me do my job. And I had a couple of those contractors a year later to apologize to me because they found out after I'd done some of the administrative and HR work I needed to do to clean house there, basically. We had people, long story short, who were using drugs on the job. It was that bad in some situations. So there was a lot of house cleaning to be done. They didn't really understand that, and that wasn't something that I think I should be publicizing to the world. I just need to deal with it. That's what my job was. Those people were gone. The public who were in that mix understood after I just worked through it and said, just trust me. I know what's going on, and I can't really tell you everything. And they apologized. One thing I probably could have handled better, though, in that whole thing is I kind of gave up on my building official pretty quickly when he was fighting me for that turf, if you will, wanting to have his own department. And the one thing I feel like I'm not even 100% sure what I could have done, but I would like to have done better is maybe he and I getting back on the same page. He ended up leaving, and we hired another building official. But it's one of those things. You don't like to lose people. You like to make it work if you can. So I'm not 100% sure what the answer would have been, but I would have liked to have been able to work it out better with him in the end. But it was some of the things were so serious here, I felt like I had to do what I had to do to get that department back where it needed to be and more professional and more responsive to the community. I feel like I accomplished that in the end.
So if you've got let me ask you this question. How do you build commission senses if you got a split commission?
Well, sometimes it's an agree to disagree thing. You gotta make your messages clear, and if my opinion is in line with one side of that split, you got to ask questions for those folks who are seeing it differently to try to figure out if there's a middle ground. But in the end, I think it's a democracy. It can be a little messy, and nothing needs to be unanimous vote all the time. You can't. You hope you work for that. You want everybody on the same page, but there's 5 of you for a reason, because you need 5 different opinions in a democracy type setting to make it work. I think otherwise you're just dealing with more of a benevolent dictatorship. So I don't see a problem with split decisions, but you do have to you try to work through it as best you can, but don't.
So how do you build a consensus with a